The wind had a sharp bite that morning, the kind of cold that slid under your coat no matter how tightly you pulled it around yourself. Tom held his daughter's hand as they crossed the nearly empty parking lot toward the school. Lily's little boots crunched against patches of frozen snow, and her bright red scarf fluttered in the wind. That's when Lily tugged at his arm. "Daddy, look!" Tom followed her gaze and saw a figure curled up on one of the benches outside the public library. A woman, young but worn down, with her knees pulled tight to her chest. Her coat looked thin, more like something for autumn than the dead of winter. At her side was a faded canvas bag, hugged to her body as if it held everything she had left. For a moment, Tom thought she was just another passerby resting, but then he saw the way her shoulders shook, not from tears but from the cold. She was shivering so badly her teeth were clenched. "Daddy, is she sleeping here?" Lily whispered, her wide eyes filled with worry. Tom didn't answer right away. He felt that familiar tug of war inside, the part of him that wanted to protect his daughter from things she was too young to understand, and the other part that couldn't ignore what was right in front of them. He tried to guide Lily along, but the little girl slowed her steps, still staring at the stranger. The woman's eyes opened just then. They were tired, ringed with shadows, but also alert, almost ashamed to have been noticed. She looked at Tom for barely a second before glancing away, as though she expected him to turn his head and keep walking. Lily tightened her grip on her father's hand. "Daddy, she looks so cold." Tom exhaled slowly, a cloud of white breath rising into the air. The bell at the school would ring in 10 minutes. He should keep moving. He should let it go. But something about the way the woman clutched that bag, like it was the last anchor keeping her from drifting away, made him pause. He couldn't shake the thought, what if it were Lily? What if someday she needed someone to stop, to care, even for a moment? The morning suddenly felt heavier. Tom walked Lily the rest of the way to the school gate, but she kept glancing back over her shoulder at the woman on the bench. Even as he bent down to kiss her cheek goodbye, Lily whispered, "Daddy, can we help her? Just a little?" He wanted to tell her that the world didn't work like that it was dangerous, that he didn't even know this woman's name. But then he saw Lily's small face framed in her scarf, her brow furrowed with a concern that was far too heavy for an 8-year-old. After dropping her off, Tom hesitated at the corner. The library was just across the street. He should go straight to work. The garage was already backed up with jobs, but his feet turned anyway. The woman was still there, hunched in her thin coat, eyes fixed on the ground. Tom cleared his throat gently so she wouldn't be startled. She looked up, startled anyway, and for a second Tom saw fear in her eyes, like she expected to be told to move along. Instead, he held out a paper cup. "Here," he said quietly. "It's hot cocoa," my daughter insisted. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. She held the cup close, like it was something precious, then whispered, "Thank you." Her voice was hoarse, but there was a raw honesty in it. Tom shifted awkwardly, not sure what else to say. He glanced at her bag, frayed at the corners, stuffed to the brim. It was clear she had nowhere else to go. "Have you tried the shelter over on Maple?" he asked. She gave a small nod. "Full, every night." The words hung heavy in the cold air. Tom rubbed the back of his neck, fighting the part of him that wanted to keep walking. The storm clouds rolling in from the north didn't make the decision any easier. The forecast had warned of heavy snow by evening. "You can't stay out here tonight," he said before he realised the words were out of his mouth. Her eyes flickered with surprise. "I'll figure something out," she murmured, though even she didn't sound convinced. Tom pictured Lily's worried face, her small voice asking, "Can we help her?" And suddenly the thought of walking away didn't sit right. He took a slow breath, his chest tight. "Look, I can't promise much, but if you've got nowhere to go, I've got a couch, just for the night." For a long moment she just stared at him, cup clutched in her hands. Then she nodded once, cautious but desperate enough to accept. Tom exhaled, already questioning his choice. He had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but tonight, at least, the woman wouldn't be alone in the cold. That night, the couch felt harder than Sarah had imagined, but the warmth of the blanket was almost enough to make her cry. She lay on her side, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the creak of pipes in the wall, the quiet rhythm of a home that wasn't hers. She tried to stay still, afraid of making noise, afraid of reminding Tom that he'd let a stranger into his home. But when the clock ticked past midnight, the tears she'd been holding back broke free. She pressed her hand to her mouth, trying not to wake anyone, but the ache inside her was too heavy to silence. In the hallway, Tom paused. He had gotten up for a glass of water and now stood frozen in the shadows, hearing the muffled sobs. His first instinct was to step forward, to tell her it was okay. But he stopped himself. She deserved her dignity. He knew what it felt like to cry in the dark after his wife had passed, when silence had been his only company. So he turned back toward his room, but not before pulling an extra blanket from the closet and leaving it folded neatly on the arm of the couch. Sarah noticed it later, her fingers brushing the fabric. Her chest tightened. She hadn't asked for it, yet here it was, a small act of kindness that cut through years of cold indifference. The next morning, when Tom walked into the kitchen, he found Sarah already awake. Her hair was tied back, her canvas bag tucked neatly beside her feet, as if she were ready to leave at a moment's notice. She offered him a timid smile and spoke first, her voice low. "Thank you for the blanket, and for trusting me even just for tonight." Tom didn't say much, only nodded as he set down his coffee mug. But the look in his eyes told her something she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't invisible anymore, and that small shift, being seen, even for a moment, would change everything that came after. The next morning, Tom woke to the smell of coffee. He frowned, half convinced he'd imagined it, but when he stepped into the kitchen, there she was. Sarah stood at the counter, hair tied back loosely, wearing the same worn jacket from the night before. She looked almost nervous, like she'd been caught doing something she wasn't supposed to. "I hope you don't mind," she said quickly. "I found the coffee and thought, well, it was the least I could do." On the table sat a plate of scrambled eggs and toast. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, and Lily was already digging in with a smile plastered on her face. "Daddy, she made breakfast, and she helped me finish my math homework too." Tom's eyebrows rose. "Homework at 7 in the morning?" Lily grinned, swinging her legs under the chair. "She's good at it. Better than you." Sarah ducked her head, embarrassed, but there was a flicker of pride in her eyes. Tom rubbed the back of his neck, unsure what to say. Part of him wanted to remind them both that this was temporary, that Sarah wasn't supposed to be filling roles in their little household. But the truth was, the coffee tasted good, and the way Lily laughed so freely made the apartment feel lighter than it had in months. After breakfast, Tom grabbed his jacket for work. Sarah rose quickly from her chair. "I'll clean up, you don't have to worry about it." He hesitated, the old caution kicking in. Was she trying too hard? Was she hiding something? But then he saw her carefully stacking the dishes, her hands steady, her movements almost ritualistic, like doing chores was a way to prove she still belonged somewhere. "All right," he said finally, "thanks." That evening, when he returned from the garage, the apartment was tidier than he'd left it. Sarah had vacuumed, folded laundry, even fixed the wobbly leg on the kitchen chair. None of it had been asked of her, she just did it. As Tom stood in the doorway, watching her tuck the blanket neatly back onto the couch, he caught himself thinking something he didn't want to admit out loud. Maybe she wasn't just passing through. And when Lily ran up holding a drawing, 3 stick figures hand in hand, and announced proudly, "This is us," Tom's heart sank and lifted all at once. He knew he should correct her, remind her that Sarah was only here for now, but he didn't. He couldn't, because deep down, he wondered if his daughter might be seeing the truth before he was ready to. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. In a building like theirs, nothing stayed private for long. One evening, Tom ran into Mrs. Keller from downstairs as he carried groceries up the narrow stairwell. She glanced at the extra bag in his arms, the one filled with food Sarah had helped cook, and then lowered her voice. "Tom, I don't mean to pry, but you've got a daughter to protect. That woman I've seen around, you don't know her, be careful." The words stung more than he expected. He mumbled a polite reply, but when he got inside, Sarah had already heard. She was standing by the couch with her blanket folded, her canvas bag strapped tight over her shoulder. "I should go," she said softly. Her eyes were steady, but her voice cracked. I don't want to cause you problems." Before Tom could answer, Lily burst into the room, her drawing pad clutched in her hands. "Look, Sarah, I drew us again." She shoved the paper forward, 3 stick figures under a bright sun, smiling. Sarah's lips trembled as she looked down. "Sweetheart, I'm not—" "Yes, you are," Lily interrupted, her voice sharp with childlike certainty. "You're part of us now." The silence was heavy. Tom felt the warning of his neighbour pressing against the innocence of his daughter's words. He took a long breath. "You're not leaving," he said finally, his tone firm. "Not because of gossip." Sarah blinked hard, swallowing back tears. But what happened next sealed it. 2 days later, Mrs. Keller herself was struggling with a heavy box of canned goods outside the building. Tom wasn't home yet, but Sarah was. Without hesitation, she hurried over, taking half the weight before the older woman could protest. By the time they reached the door, Mrs. Keller was out of breath. She looked at Sarah differently now. Not as a stranger, but as someone who had stepped in when it mattered. That night, Tom found a small note slipped under his door in neat handwriting. "Maybe I was wrong. She seems like a good one." Sarah held the note in her hand, eyes shining. For once, she didn't feel like she was fighting to belong. She was simply proving, one quiet act at a time, that she did. The garage was buzzing that afternoon, phones ringing, the air thick with the smell of motor oil. Tom had brought Lily along, who sat at the corner desk colouring, while Sarah kept to herself near the small office, sorting through a pile of invoices. She hadn't been asked, but the stack had been calling to her. Messy, scattered, ignored. Tom was buried under the hood of a sedan when he heard her voice, soft but certain. "Tom, this doesn't look right." He straightened, wiping grease from his hands, and walked over. Sarah held up a sheet of paper, her finger pointing to a line item. "You ordered 12 filters, but the supplier charged you for 20. That's nearly $200 more than it should be." One of the mechanics leaned over her shoulder and let out a low whistle. "She's got sharp eyes. We've been trying to track down where that money went for weeks." Tom frowned, scanning the invoice. She was right. He looked up at her, a little stunned. "How'd you catch that so fast?" Sarah hesitated, almost embarrassed. "I used to work front office at an auto parts company. Before everything fell apart, numbers were kind of my thing." For a second, the whole room went quiet. Then the mechanic chuckled. "Man, you better keep her around, Tom. She's saving you more than she costs." Colour rose in Sarah's cheeks, but there was pride there too, pride she hadn't felt in years. Later, while Lily drew cars and flowers on scrap paper, Sarah sat at the desk, labelling folders, stacking invoices, making neat rows where there had been chaos. By the time Tom finished with the car, his cluttered office looked transformed. "You didn't have to do all this," he said, standing in the doorway. Sarah met his eyes steady this time. "I know, but it feels good to be useful again." That night, as they packed up, Lily skipped out of the garage with her new drawing. She had added a 4th figure to the picture, a little desk with Sarah behind it, smiling. Underneath, Lily had scrawled in big letters, "Sarah the hero." Sarah laughed when she saw it, but Tom caught the way her hand lingered on the page, like it was the first time in years she believed those words could be true. Sarah's first paycheck wasn't much. A handful of hours at the garage barely covered groceries, but when the manager handed her the envelope, her hands shook. It wasn't just paper and numbers, it was proof that she still had something to give. That afternoon, instead of spending it on herself, she walked into a discount shoe store. Rows of bright sneakers lined the walls, far out of her budget, but tucked in the corner she found them. A simple pair on clearance, bright blue with tiny silver stars along the sides. The kind of shoes a little girl would love. When she brought the bag home, Lily tore into it with wide eyes. "For me?" Sarah nodded, smiling nervously. "Your old ones had holes, you need something better." Lily slipped them on right away, her face lighting up as if she'd been given the whole world. She ran circles around the living room, the stars flashing with every step. "They're perfect!" she shouted. Then she stopped suddenly, threw her arms around Sarah's waist and whispered, "No one's ever done this for me before." Sarah froze. The words pierced straight through her. She hugged Lily back, fighting the tears burning at the corners of her eyes. From the kitchen doorway, Tom watched silently. He knew how little Sarah had, how carefully she stretched every dollar. And yet the very first thing she chose to buy wasn't food for herself or a coat or even a bus pass. It was shoes for his daughter. Later that night, when Lily had fallen asleep with her new sneakers placed neatly by the bed, Sarah sat on the couch staring at her empty envelope. Tom lowered himself into the chair across from her. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. Sarah shook her head. "I wanted to. She makes me feel like I belong somewhere again." Tom didn't answer right away. He just nodded, the lump in his throat making words impossible. Because in that moment, he realised Sarah wasn't just filling space in their lives. She was becoming family. Spring came slowly, melting away the piles of snow that had lined the streets all winter. With it came small changes, longer days, lighter coats, and for Sarah, something she hadn't felt in years: stability. Between her work at the garage and the odd jobs she picked up at the library, she managed to save just enough for a deposit on a modest apartment a few blocks away. When she told Tom, she half expected him to look relieved. Instead, he just nodded, hiding whatever was stirring in his eyes. "That's good," he said quietly. "That's real good." On moving day, Tom borrowed an old van from the garage. The three of them loaded her few belongings, mostly donated furniture, a second-hand mattress, and the same canvas bag she'd clung to on that freezing morning months ago. Lily insisted on carrying a box herself, though it was nearly as big as she was. The apartment was small, one bedroom with thin carpet and walls that echoed when they spoke. But when Sarah set down her bag and turned the key in the lock, it felt like something sacred. For the first time in years, she wasn't a guest. She wasn't in a shelter. This was hers. "Looks nice," Tom said, glancing around. His voice was gruff, but there was warmth behind it. "It's perfect," Sarah replied, her throat tightening. Lily tugged at Sarah's sleeve and handed her a folded piece of paper. "I made you something." Sarah opened it carefully. Inside was a drawing. 3 figures standing under a bright sun, holding hands. Above them, in Lily's uneven handwriting, was a single word: home. Sarah's vision blurred. She knelt down and hugged Lily so tightly the little girl squealed. "I'll put it on the fridge," Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. "First thing." Tom stood back, watching the scene unfold. He had thought this day might feel like goodbye, but instead it felt like a beginning. Sarah wasn't just moving into her own place. She was stepping into a life again, one she had almost stopped believing she deserved. As they left to grab the last box from the van, Sarah lingered by the doorway, her hand resting on the new key. For the first time in years, the world didn't feel so heavy. She wasn't walking into this alone. The mailbox clattered shut as Tom walked in with the day's mail. He tossed a stack of envelopes on the kitchen table, mostly bills and junk. Sarah, who was stirring a pot of soup, froze when she saw one envelope addressed to her. The handwriting wasn't familiar, but the return stamp was. A debt collection office from the city she had left behind. Her hands shook as she tore it open. A balance she could never pay. Past due notices, threats of legal action, words that dragged her back into the darkness she thought she had escaped. Tom noticed her face pale. "Everything all right?" Sarah quickly folded the letter, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's nothing, just old stuff." But later that night, when the apartment was quiet, Tom stepped into the hall and found Sarah on the couch, clutching the letter in both hands. Her eyes were red, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. "I can't stay," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I'll just drag you down. I'll ruin everything." Tom sat across from her, leaning his elbows on his knees. "You're not ruining anything. You've been helping more than you realise." She shook her head. "You don't understand. I had a steady job once, a tiny apartment, plans, and then my mum got sick. I took time off to care for her. The bills piled up, I lost my job, lost my place. After she passed, I just stopped fighting. One thing after another until there was nothing left. And now it's all coming back. I can't ask you to take on my mess." Her voice cracked on the last word and tears spilled down her cheeks. She tried to turn away, but Tom reached out, steadying her hand. "You're not asking," he said firmly. "You're just here, and we want you here." A small sound came from the hallway. Lily stood there in her pyjamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Don't leave," she said softly, her eyes glistening. "You're family now." Sarah's breath caught. She pressed the letter against her chest as though it might vanish if she held it tightly enough. Slowly she nodded, tears streaming freely now. Tom gathered Lily close and looked at Sarah. Whatever comes, we'll figure it out together. For the first time in years, Sarah felt something stronger than fear. She felt the weight of belonging. And in that moment, the letter in her hand didn't feel like the end of the road. It felt like a test she no longer had to face alone. Spring brought change in small, quiet ways. The snow melted from the sidewalks, the days grew longer, and with them, Sarah's courage. Between her part-time hours at the garage and a few shifts she'd picked up at the library, she finally had enough saved for a deposit on a modest one-bedroom apartment. It wasn't much: peeling paint, a creaky radiator, a second-hand couch donated from a church down the street. But when the landlord handed her the key, she felt something she hadn't in years: ownership of her own life. On moving day, Tom borrowed a van from the garage. Together, the three of them carried her few belongings. Lily insisted on helping, lugging a box half her size up the stairs. At the top, she nearly tripped, and Sarah dropped everything to steady her. Lily looked up, cheeks flushed, and said, "You saved me!" Sarah smiled, but her chest tightened. She knew this day was supposed to feel like goodbye, stepping out of Tom's home, out of Lily's daily life. But the thought of leaving them behind carved a hollow ache inside her. Inside the apartment, Sarah set her canvas bag down by the door. The same bag she had clutched on that freezing library bench months ago. Back then, it had carried everything she owned. Now, it was just a bag. She finally had closets, shelves, a place to breathe. "Looks good," Tom said, setting the last box on the counter. His voice was steady, but his eyes gave him away. He wasn't just proud, he was moved. "It's perfect," Sarah whispered, running her fingers over the cool brass of the key. That's when Lily tugged at her sleeve. "I made you something." Sarah unfolded the paper and froze. It was another drawing. 3 figures standing under a bright yellow sun, holding hands. Only this time, above their heads, Lily had written in big block letters, "Family." The word hit Sarah harder than any key, any paycheck, any apartment ever could. Her knees buckled and she sank down to Lily's level, pulling her close as tears spilled over. "I'll put this on my fridge," she promised, her voice trembling. "First thing, it's the best housewarming gift I've ever had." Tom stood back, watching them, his throat tight. He had thought this day would be about letting Sarah go, but it wasn't. It was about watching her rise, not alone, but with people who saw her, who believed in her, who claimed her as their own. And as Sarah hung the drawing on her empty fridge door, the small apartment didn't feel empty anymore. It felt alive. It felt like the beginning of a life she never thought she'd get back. The park smelled of fresh-cut grass, and the air was filled with the laughter of children chasing each other across the field. Sarah spread out a checkered blanket under a wide oak tree, smoothing the corners nervously. It was the first time she'd ever hosted something for them. Her chance to give back, even in a small way. Tom carried a cooler, while Lily ran ahead, her new sneakers flashing blue as she jumped into the middle of the blanket. "Picnic time," she announced, grinning from ear to ear. Sarah pulled out sandwiches she'd made that morning, a simple salad, and a batch of cookies that had baked uneven in her tiny oven. "Don't laugh," she warned, setting them down. "They might be a little crunchy." Tom bit into one, pretending to examine it seriously. Then he nodded. "Best cookie I've had all week." Sarah rolled her eyes but smiled, and Lily laughed so hard she nearly tipped over her juice box. The three of them sat together in the gentle sunshine, eating, talking, sharing stories that weren't dramatic or heavy, just the kind of small, ordinary things families talk about, and that was what made it extraordinary. After lunch, Lily lay down on the blanket, her head resting against Sarah's lap. She looked up at the sky and said, in the casual way only children can say something life-changing, "You're like my second mum now." Sarah's breath caught, her hands stilled in Lily's hair, and she looked over at Tom. He didn't correct Lily, he didn't hesitate. He just gave a quiet nod, his expression steady, almost tender. Sarah swallowed hard, blinking back the tears. She leaned down and whispered, "I'd be honoured to be." The world around them kept moving, kites flying, dogs barking, families laughing. But for that moment, under that oak tree, time seemed to pause. Sarah realised that what she had been searching for all along wasn't just a roof or a paycheck. It was belonging. It was laughter on a blanket in the park, a little girl calling her family, and a man who had once opened his door to a stranger and, without knowing it, changed all of their lives. And as Lily drifted into a nap, Sarah tilted her face toward the sky, letting the warmth of the sun settle into her bones. The storm of her past was over. This quiet, ordinary joy was home. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness, a warm drink, a couch for the night, a pair of shoes, can change a life. But more than that, they remind us that family isn't only about blood, it's about opening your heart and making room for someone who needs it. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. I'm truly grateful for your time. If this touched your heart, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you again soon here on Rain Inside.